Much of the nation has lived in self-quarantine for 3 weeks now to minimize the threat of person-to-person transmission. So how has the virus not only affected the world's second largest economy, but the world's largest workforce? And with many millions returning to their workplace, how to balance productivity with people's health? Joining me for the discussion from Shenyang is Mario Cavolo, founder and CEO of M Communication Group, a Chinese-based media professional. He's also an author. His works include 2 books on China, with his most recent title, The Dragon Roars On. And from Shanghai, Professor Jiyong, Deputy Dean of the School of International Relations and Public Affairs at Shanghai International Studies University. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. So I want to ask you about this difficult decision, whether or not to restart production for the Chinese economy. Mr. Cavolo, let me go to you first. How do you look at the imperatives of letting the Chinese economic machine rumble on versus, not roll on this time, rumbles on, versus the potential risks of doing all of these amid an unfolding epidemic, which we do not know whether it has peaked or not?
Thank you, Liu Xin, and that's the point. We don't know whether it's peaked or not, and the comment that was being discussed in my circle over the last few days was this idea that something that we should be very proud of and respectful of, and that's the idea that China, from the orders of the government, but also the people, has literally fallen on the economic sword in the name of protecting people. And how much longer does that have to go on? How much longer can it go on? I don't know, but we certainly don't need any, anti-China rhetoric like you talked about in your Headline Buster show. We just don't need that now. There's still too much of it out there. Instead, what we need is to recognize that this xisheng, right, the sacrifice, the Chinese word for sacrifice, is happening. It's happening now. It looks like it still needs to happen for a bit longer.
So how do you look at the sensitivity or the rationality behind this decision to ask people to go back to work slowly, although we do not know how the situation is really developing with the virus, but nevertheless, the Chinese economy can't really wait anymore in the eyes of the Chinese authority. Mr. Cavolo, once again.
Well, we say we can't wait anymore. Well, what do we do when we're in situations in life when we have no choice? Sometimes this is what life brings. Life brings blessings sometimes. Life brings just neutral good days, and sometimes life brings tragedy. There isn't any problem, and again, I hear too much of this, the negative type. Again, you've talked about it. We all hear the anti-China sentiments. We don't want to hear it. We don't need to hear it now. The focus now is on the idea that there's some tragedy here. That's what people dying from a particularly nasty flu-type virus is, and that's what this is. And so there is sacrifice. So we are individual people, but we have to go up to the macro view and say, we're a country. A country is a society of communities. Communities are made up of people. People are families. We're all having to do something we don't want to do, but it's in the name of protecting people. I'm a dad, and I have a wife. We all have our families. We're one of the ones that you mentioned, living the boring 3 weeks. We're all at home. Everything is shut down. School's shut down. We have to do it.
Yeah.
This is what we're all doing together. And in this sense, it's a united front. It's kind of amazing.
Absolutely. Professor Jiyong, from an economic point of view, how do you look at the importance of China not letting its economic activity grind to a halt, at least? Because at this moment, the consumptions are down, restorations are down, tourism, you name it, transportation for an economy that is so important, not just for its own people, but also for the rest of the world. This is simply inconceivable. So amid a very capricious situation, China has decided that people need to go back to work, although in a prudent and phased manner. Professor Jiyong.
Thank you, Mr. Liu Xin, for your question. I think the Chinese government has already adopted different measures to stop the halt of economic development. And Chinese government attaches great importance to survival of enterprises while making all of effort to curb the spread of coronavirus. Both Chinese government, central government, and local government have taken multi-pronged measures and policies to ease their money problem. For example, on the national level, for example, Chinese Ministry of Finance has announced a provision of financial support. The People's Bank of China also announced that it will just provide support for enterprises affected by the coronavirus and has extended the tax filing deadline for February. Chinese Ministry of Commerce also released a flexible policy to provide fund payment for wholesale and retail enterprises hit hard by the coronavirus outbreak. Actually, on the local level, individual provinces and cities also has adopted or released various and preferential policies to help just the small and medium-sized enterprises. Let's take Shanghai, for example. In order to beef up the confidence of small and medium-sized enterprises in the short term and just ensure stable employment, and Shanghai Municipal Human Resources and Social Security Bureau adopted measures to reduce the financial burden of enterprises. I think those measures will be very helpful for the enterprises to just maintain their economic development.
Hopefully, yes, because because from what I understand, the impact has been very big. You know, restaurants, nobody is going to restaurants anymore, and when everybody is stop doing that in the country, that's a really big issue. But at this moment, the government is definitely not advising people to go and eat out and you know, congregate, because that's still quite dangerous. But I do want to ask you this question, because China has actually set very ambitious goals for the year 2020. Among them, for instance, China wants to completely eradicate absolute poverty, and China also said it wanted to build itself into a moderate, prosperous society by the end of 2020. This is one of the 2 centennial goals of China. So, Mr. Cavolo, do you see any possibility that the achievement of these important goals might be affected because of what we're seeing now? Of course, we do not know. We're just speculating at this moment.
Sure, but this is a speculation that I'll gladly make right now, because it's going to fall as a dual speculation. On one side, are we going to say that this is going to put a dent on what is possible in terms of growth and accomplishing a lot of those things, and say that Q1 in the first quarter? Yes, sure. We would kind of be unreasonable to say it's not going to put a dent in our plans. It is making an enormous dent. It's going to hurt. On the other hand, there's something else happening. There's a swell of spirit as well. And that, I have a funny feeling, is going to go a long way to show the world that something magical is going to happen. This is what happened to me over the last week or so. You know, I posted an article about this. Stop being anti-China. Stop with all the anti-China headlines. And there was a swell of support for that. And that swell of support wasn't intellectual. It wasn't business people. It was coming from people's pride. And I'm getting a very strong sense about that. So maybe because of a crisis, actually, surprisingly, by the end of the year, we'll end up even better than we had originally planned.
A lot of people are actually feeling very strong about the country, about the nation, about the potential of this people, because of the huge, you know,
pull people together.
The wave of solidarity and brotherhood that has been illustrated through this epidemic. Professor Jiyong, how do you look at the near-term and medium-term impact, repercussions of this epidemic on the Chinese economy?
Yeah, of course, I think the coronavirus epidemic is posed an unprecedented challenge for China's economic development. But, you know, the Chinese government had just recovered from SARS in 2003, and has also cooperated with other countries to fight Ebola. And I think very optimistic about China's potential to fight the coronavirus and to recover from this kind of epidemic. And of course, in the near term, I think it will be a lot. There will be a lot of difficulties. For example, many small and medium-sized enterprises were closed, and they couldn't just make ends meet, and they have to pay the salary, but they don't have any revenues. So it's a kind of difficulty. But I think these difficulties are very temporary. And because the government has to, just release the very helpful policies to help those small-sized companies to survive. So I think it's just a temporary difficulty.
Okay.
But for the long run, Chinese government, Chinese just industry structure is very sound. And once the epidemic is successfully controlled, and Chinese government can put a lot of efforts to just revive economic development. And so what I want to say that, and I think we should be high spirit and be confident that China is strong and resilient enough.
Let me leave a little bit of time for my last question. I do want to hear the comment on Mr. Cavolo on this. How do you look at the alternative of other systems? For instance, people are saying, when China with a strong government, it's bad, but in terms of difficulty, a strong government has its advantages. Would the situation have been handled any differently by a Western system and better? Mr. Cavolo, keep it 30 seconds, please.
You said it exactly right, that let's call it central planning government. People in the West are, every government has its pluses and minuses. Central planning government can say, tomorrow go out and build the bridge. Then the very next day, people are out building that bridge. They're building the hospital. They're making it happen very, very quickly. Only China could have done this. But they've also doing it with support from some folks in the international community, local, real people, like, for example, the American Chamber helping pull together medical supplies and all those types of things. China could do this. I don't think very many other countries could.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We are going to leave it there. Mr. Mario Cavolo, an American businessman living in China for the past 20 years, and Professor Jiyong from Shanghai International Studies University.